Imagine ejecting from a fighter jet, just under the speed of sound. You hit a wall of air so hard that almost every bone in your body just, well, it shatters instantly.
Yeah, it's absolute chaos.
Right, you are plummeting toward the freezing ocean, essentially broken to pieces. And your survival now depends entirely on, biological and psychological mechanisms you barely even control.
And the paradox at the center of all this is just fascinating.
It really is. Today, we are exploring the exact mechanics of human survival. We're looking at what keeps a person alive in the sky, in the dirt, and why those exact same survival traits can quietly, devastatingly destroy them when they finally come home.
We are pulling from this massive stack of notes
Yeah.
based on a raw, really revealing conversation with former Navy SEAL Andy Stumpf. And he pulls back the curtain on the actual, completely unromanticized reality of special operations.
Because the core theme in all these materials is that grit and resilience, they aren't absolute virtues, right?
Exactly. The tools you use to survive extreme combat are often the very tools that will completely dismantle your personal life, if you don't know how to turn them off.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've ever felt like your own ability to push through pain is somehow working against you, or if you're just intensely curious about what actually happens to the human brain under absolute maximum stress, you are in the right place.
Yeah, but to understand the mind of a modern operator, we first really have to understand the completely bizarre environment they're operating in right now.
Oh man, yeah. Because reading through these notes, the modern battlefield sounds like this chaotic mix of World War I and a sci-fi movie.
It's a profound juxtaposition. You have troops in trenches, literally clearing corners with rifles, making eye contact with the adversary, covered in mud.
Right.
And in that exact same physical space, they are navigating this invisible web of cutting-edge electronic warfare.
And a major focus in Stumpf's observations is a threat he never even had to consider during his own deployments decades ago, which is commercial drones.
Yeah, they have completely altered the landscape of combat medicine.
I found this part wild because we aren't talking about massive million-dollar military predators here. We're talking about cheap DJI drones.
Right, the exact kind you can order on the internet for a few $100 to film your family vacation.
Exactly. And the medical shift is terrifying.
It really is. Because for years, trauma medics trained intensely for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And those blasts come from the ground up, causing very specific lower extremity trauma.
But now, adversaries are rigging these off-the-shelf drones to drop physical explosive weapons, what the military calls kinetic weapons, directly onto troops from above.
Yeah, so the injury patterns have completely shifted to the upper torso and head. Medics are facing this entirely new, aggressive threat vector that is incredibly difficult to defend against.
Because it's cheap, it swarms, and it attacks from a blind spot. And hovering right behind those drones is, the real elephant in the room, which is artificial intelligence. The sources break down the integration of AI into warfare into 3 distinct phases, and it's pretty chilling.
You start with human in the loop, right? Where a human is making the decisions, but the AI is assisting, maybe highlighting targets.
Yeah, then you move to human on the loop, where the AI is running the show and the human is just overwatching, basically able to hit an emergency stop button.
Right. And finally, the phase that terrifies everyone, human out of the loop.
That's where the AI finds the target, decides it's a threat, and executes a strike with 0 human input. It completely reminds me of self-driving cars.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. It's the difference between using cruise control, using autopilot with your hands hovering over the wheel just in case, and being fast asleep in the backseat while the car drives itself at 100 miles an hour. Except in this scenario, the car is armed.
The danger of that final phase human out of the loop is purely a matter of processing speed. Well, if an adversary uses an AI that can analyze a battlefield, identify a target, and fire in milliseconds, a human brain simply cannot compete. It creates a terrifying race to the bottom.
Right, because if you keep a human in the loop for safety, you are tactically slower. You lose.
Exactly.
Wait, I'm genuinely confused by that, though. If the AI is moving at lightning speed, how is a human commander ever supposed to keep up to make a final call? Doesn't inserting a human fundamentally defeat the purpose of having this ultra-fast AI in the first place?
That is the crucial limitation Stumpf clarifies in the notes. In the realm of special operations, AI is used for the massive data crunching leading up to an operation, not the trigger pull during it.
Okay, so it's more about intelligence gathering.
Yes. AI might analyze the entire electronic spectrum of a city. Cell phone signals, radio traffic, facial recognition feeds to pinpoint a high-value target. It builds the intelligence package at a speed humans just can't match.
But it doesn't make the final gonna go call to launch a raid.
Correct. A human ground force commander still has to look at that data and decide to send a human being across a physical threshold into a room. The ultimate moral and tactical weight still rests on a human brain.
I guess that's somewhat comforting, especially since the internet loves to invent military tech that doesn't even exist yet.
Oh, definitely.
Like, the notes mention this rumor floating around called ghost murmur technology. The claim is that satellites can read human heartbeats from space to find hidden targets.
And Stumpf completely laughs this off as sci-fi nonsense.
Yeah, he points out that if we actually possessed tech that could read a heartbeat through the roof of a bunker, we would be using it every single day to find missing hikers in national parks.
Right, he emphasizes that there are much less complex, much more practical ways to track people down.
Yeah, like we don't need space magic.
No, we don't. And actually, the reliance on high-tech solutions often acts as a smokescreen for deeper structural struggles. The sources discuss how the U.S. military has increasingly struggled with what they call definable end states.
In plain English, that means going to war without actually knowing what winning looks like, right?
Precisely that. The 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan is cited as a prime example here.
Yeah, that was messy.
You have a 20-year engagement utilizing the most advanced technology on Earth, but without a clear strategic goal, it ends in a rushed exit where multi-million-dollar helicopters are left sitting on the tarmac.
Because shifting domestic politics and complex global realities dictate these outcomes far more than any new drone or software.
Exactly. Technology cannot solve a lack of strategic clarity.
And the ultimate irony is that all this advanced technology relies entirely on machines not breaking. When they do break, the human operator is violently thrown back into the Stone Age, literally.
Which brings us back to that visceral horror we started with, ejecting from a fighter jet.
Yeah, the sources detail the story of a pilot named Keegan Gill. He was flying an F-18 and entered a maneuver that put the aircraft into an unrecoverable dive toward the ocean.
And he had no choice but to pull the ejection handle while traveling just under the speed of sound.
The physical trauma described here is pure nightmare fuel. Hitting the air at that speed isn't like sticking your hand out the window on the highway.
No, it's like hitting a solid brick wall.
The sheer force of the wind took almost every bone in his body that wasn't broken and snapped it, and took the ones that were already broken and pulverized them.
He was practically liquefied inside his flight suit.
But the part that is so medically fascinating is how he survived the water.
Yeah, he landed in the freezing ocean, and that extreme temperature is the only reason he didn't bleed to death. His body underwent massive vasoconstriction.
Let's break that down for the listener. What is actually happening in the body during vasoconstriction?
Think of your circulatory system like the heating system in a large house.
Okay.
If a blizzard hits and the furnace can't keep up, you might close the vents in the guest rooms and the hallways to force all the hot air into the living room where the family is gathered.
Right. So when Gil hit that freezing water, his brain realized it was losing heat rapidly.
Exactly. It commanded the blood vessels in his extremities, his arms and legs, to instantly clamp down and constrict. It shunted all his blood to his vital organs in his core to keep his heart and brain alive.
And because those blood vessels clamped down so aggressively, it essentially acted as internal tourniquets for his massive injuries, keeping his blood inside his body until rescue swimmers could pull him out.
A literal biological miracle.
Truly. But even if you survive the ejection and make it to the dirt, the notes highlight this incredible fish-out-of-water phenomenon.
Oh, the cross-training aspect.
Yeah. You take an elite, combat-tested F-18 pilot, put them on the ground, hand them a topographical paper map, and they are completely lost. Conversely, you put a hardened Navy SEAL into the backseat of an F-18, and they spend 2 days vomiting from the G-forces.
It illustrates the intense hyper-specialization of these roles. A fighter pilot processes information in a three-dimensional high-altitude environment where they control the speed, the angle, and the engagement.
But when they are shot down, they are violently ripped from that 3D world of absolute control and slammed into a 2D world on the dirt where they are suddenly the prey hiding in bushes.
That is a total cognitive paradigm shift.
And to prepare them for that shift, the military uses SARE school. SARE stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape.
It's a brutal program designed for aviators and special operations personnel who are at high risk of ending up behind enemy lines.
The sources describe them being hunted through the woods for days, and eventually, by design, everyone gets captured. Then they're thrown into what Stumpf casually calls Slipey Camp.
Yeah, they are shoved into tiny enclosures that look like dog kennels.
They can't stand, they can't sit comfortably, heavy metal music is blasting at deafening volumes, and they undergo simulated extreme interrogation. But I mean, why dog kennels and loud music? Are they just trying to physically exhaust them?
The physical exhaustion is secondary, really. The underlying mechanism of SEER training is sensory and emotional manipulation.
Okay, so it's not about combat skills.
No, they aren't trying to teach an F-18 pilot how to fight hand-to-hand like an action hero to escape a POW camp. The curriculum is entirely about establishing a baseline of emotional control.
By putting them in a tiny box with blaring noise, they strip away all comfort, dignity, and external processing tools. The brain naturally panics.
Exactly. Siri teaches them how to recognize that internal panic, compartmentalize it, and manage their mind when they have absolutely nothing left to rely on but their own thoughts.
If SEER is designed to test emotional control under sensory deprivation, how does the military filter for the people capable of doing that in the first place?
That brings us to the ultimate psychological laboratory, Navy SEAL selection, known as BUDS.
The attrition rates are staggering and give us a window into human limits. Stumpf went through a winter class of BUDS. They started with 180 highly qualified, physically elite candidates.
And they graduated 18.
18 out of 180. That is an 80 to 90% failure rate, driven in the winter almost entirely by the Pacific Ocean cold.
Well, see, physical failure actually accounts for a very small percentage of the drops.
Really? I have to challenge this because I look at an 80 or 90% attrition rate, and I naturally assume it's just muscles literally giving out or guys going into clinical hyperthermia. Are you telling me that's not what's breaking these incredibly fit guys?
I am. When Stumpf returned to BUDS years later as an instructor, he had a massive revelation watching from the outside. The candidates weren't quitting because their bodies failed. They were quitting because they became overwhelmed by the perception of time.
The perception of time. Okay, wait, unpack that for me.
A student would stand on the beach on day one, shivering, water temperature in the 50s, and their brain would look at the conceptual gap between day one and graduation on day 180.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they would tell themselves, I cannot possibly be this cold and this tired for 6 solid months. They quit because they were reacting emotionally to an imaginary future that hadn't even happened yet.
So their mind time traveled to future pain.
Precisely.
So the defense against that is a psychological tool the notes call chunking. You shrink the timeline down to the next microscopic step. You don't think about 6 months. You don't think about tomorrow. You just focus on surviving until breakfast.
And there is actual neurology behind why this works.
Yeah.
When you look at an overwhelming 6-month timeline, your brain's fear center, the amygdala, hijacks your system. It floods you with stress hormones and screams at you to escape.
But when you chunk it down and say, I just need to tie my boots, you engage the prefrontal cortex, the logical problem-solving part of your brain. It literally forces the panic to subside.
The instructors at BUDS are fully aware of this neurology. Their entire job is to design evolutions, which are specific, structured training exercises that break a student's ability to chunk.
They actively try to bypass the prefrontal cortex and trigger that primal amygdala panic.
Take the drown-proofing evolution. Students have their hands tied behind their backs and their feet tied together. They have to bob up and down in a deep pool for an hour, pushing off the bottom to get a breath.
Or the 50-meter underwater swim. You have to swim the entire length of an Olympic pool without surfacing once. But you have to start by doing a front flip into the water.
Right, and that flip serves zero practical diving purpose.
It exists solely to kill your forward momentum, burn precious oxygen, and instantly disorient you. It spikes your heart rate and messes with your breath-holding mechanics right out of the gate.
But the ultimate filter for this emotional control is the knot-tying dive test. A student is underwater, breathing from a regulator. An instructor swims down, violently rips the breathing tube out of the student's mouth, and ties a knot in the air hoses.
So the student is now suffocating.
They are. They have to calmly trace the hose, untie the knot, clear the mouthpiece, and resume breathing.
All while their lungs are burning.
Yes, and the instructors will actively assault them during this, yanking their head back, spinning them, tying incredibly complex knots.
That's insane.
If the student breaks procedure, if the amygdala takes over and they just panic, thrashing around and trying to shove the mouthpiece in without untying the knot, they fail. They are immediately pulled to the surface.
So it is not a test of technical diving ability.
Not at all. It is a psychological test to see if you can suppress the absolute primal terror of suffocating and still follow a logical, step-by-step procedure.
They are literal psychological tormentors. The sources note that instructors use time manipulation as a weapon.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
They'll purposefully set their waterproof watches to the wrong day. A hallucinating, sleep-deprived student will look at an instructor's wrist to ground themselves, see that it says Tuesday, and despair because they thought it was Thursday.
Or an instructor will sit next to a freezing student in the surf, sip warm coffee, and casually mention, "Man, my shift just started. I'm going to keep you in this water for another 12 hours."
It's just a brutal tactic.
The instructor is actively trying to force the student's mind to time travel to that overwhelming future. If the student thinks about the next 12 hours, they stand up, ring the bell, and quit.
But if they just focus on the immediate physical sensation of the water hitting them in that exact second, they stay.
Right?
This entire framework completely dismantles our romanticized idea of bravery. We love the Hollywood trope of the fearless warrior, but Stumpf is explicit in the notes. He actually fears fearless people.
He views them as a massive liability on the battlefield.
Yeah, if you are in a combat zone taking incoming fire and you aren't feeling fear, you are either completely oblivious to your surroundings or you are a sociopath.
The objective of all this training isn't to eradicate fear. The goal is to feel the overwhelming physiological response of fear and still execute the procedure. Because on the battlefield, indecision is what gets you killed, not fear.
Synthesizing all of this, quitting is fundamentally an emotional response. By keeping your mind entirely in the present micro-moment, you deny your brain the bandwidth to construct an imaginary, unbearable future.
That is the superpower of elite psychological resilience.
But what happens when you take a human brain that has been perfectly engineered to suppress comfort, ignore pain, and endure anything, and you put that brain inside a normal living room?
You get a catastrophe. We project this superhero myth onto special operators, assuming that because they can survive a war zone, they are invincible in all aspects of life.
And Stumpf dismantles this immediately. They are normal humans tasked with exceptional jobs, and they struggle deeply with normal life.
To put a number on it, the divorce rate in the special operations community hovers around 80 to 85%.
That number is absolutely staggering. And Stumpf offered a deeply personal admission that perfectly illustrates why that number is so high.
Yeah, he revealed that he stayed in a toxic, failing personal relationship for 10 extra years.
Not because the relationship was healthy or fixable, but because his entire identity, his core currency as a human being, was built on the phrase, "I never quit."
Every morning, he looked in the mirror and dared himself to quit, calling himself weak if he walked away. He actively chose to suffer.
This phenomenon is captured in a concept from our notes called the curse of psychological strength.
The premise is that high-performing individuals are heavily rewarded in public for their grit. They get promotions, they get medals, they get societal admiration.
But they pay a devastating hidden price for it in private. If you're listening to this and you're the person in your friend group or your office who always has it together, who always carries the heavy load, you need to hear this next part.
Because highly resilient people build an enormous superhuman capacity to carry emotional weight, they will tolerate the intolerable in their personal lives.
They treat a profound lack of love or a deep emotional disconnection as just another BUDS evolution, just another marathon they have to endure.
It's like trying to fix a delicate software bug by smashing the computer with a sledgehammer. The tool is entirely wrong for the problem.
Resilience is a physical and mental blunt instrument.
Intimacy and healthy relationships require vulnerability and communication. You cannot endure your way to a good marriage.
When a highly resilient person's partner puts them sixth on the priority list, a person with normal boundaries would say, "This hurts, I'm leaving."
But the resilient person says, "I can handle this pain. I will carry this broken relationship on my back." It inevitably results in total self-abandonment.
That is such a crucial warning. If your only tool in life is never quit, you are headed for a crash. You don't apply the never quit mentality to a drinking problem, and you shouldn't apply it to a situation that is fundamentally destroying you.
Stumpf realized, a decade too late, that sometimes falling short of an arbitrary goal and recognizing when a situation is broken beyond repair is vastly healthier than destroying yourself just to prove you can suffer.
This explains the brutal identity deceleration veterans face when they leave the service. The statistics on suicide in the veteran and special operations communities are anomalously high.
They lose their tribe, they lose their high-stakes purpose, and they come home to families they've been isolated from for 270 days a year.
And worst of all, their primary coping mechanism, enduring pain, silently turns against them.
It's the curse of competence.
Because they're the ones everyone else relies on. They refuse to ask for help. If you are the strong friend, people hesitate to check on you, and you feel too much shame to admit that the armor is cracking.
The tools of war are terrible instruments for peace. The capacity to suffer is an absolute necessity for survival in extreme environments, but it is a terrible blueprint for building a fulfilling life.
We've covered incredible ground today. We looked at the explosive shift in modern drone warfare, the physiological miracle of surviving an F-18 ejection, the neurological battle of time manipulation at BUDS, and the hidden, devastating dangers of treating your personal life like a combat survival test.
So much to unpack.
Truly. And I want to leave you with something Andy Stumpf emphasized to anyone listening. The feeling of being completely alone in your struggles is a dangerous lie. Whatever overwhelm you're facing, whatever pain you're trying to silently endure, you are not the only one. Others are feeling it too. Isolation is the enemy.
As we wrap up, I want you to look at your own life and ask yourself this. If your psychological strength allows you to indefinitely endure a bad situation, a toxic job, a broken relationship, a destructive habit, what is the trigger you need to build into your life right now to signal when it's time to stop enduring and start changing course?
A profound question to mull over. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.